Hey, I'm Bethany, or Beth for short, and my life is full of drama. The most important and hurtful part of this is that I really love somebody, but we have so many obstacles to being together. Right now, I'm almost 19 years old, but the story I'm going to share with you started when I was much younger. I was born in a tiny town, into a family of a military officer and a housewife. As people sometimes say, occupation determines the lifestyle. This was so true for my parents. While my dad was carrying out his duties, my mom was raising me and looking after the house. In other words, doing what any good wife and mother usually did. But as soon as my dad retired and settled at home with his small car painting business, one of his old army buddies started visiting us on an annual basis. I called him Uncle Owen. When I first saw him, I was 5 years old, I think. He was very tall and extremely handsome. I mean, even though he was only a couple of years younger than my dad, he looked really young. He came to our town every winter and sometimes stayed for a couple of months. He wasn't lucky enough to have a family, never had his own kids. So he said he really loved me as if I was his own daughter, and I remember that he always brought me lots of presents. I still have most of them today. Uncle Owen lived in a big city, and when he'd come to see us, he would often tell a bunch of wild stories of the life he had there, and I was totally amazed by them, literally sitting with my jaw wide open while I was listening to him. I even abandoned my friends when he'd come. They were a little offended by that, and I ended up apologizing to them after my Uncle Owen left, but as long as he stayed at our house, I had this feeling inside me. You know that small children usually have on the eve of their birthdays? And I also thought back then that as soon as I grew up, I was moving to that city to live there just like Uncle Owen and to become just as happy and interesting as he was. And he was never like my parents' other friends. You know, when other adults came to us, they usually sent me upstairs to stay in my room. Or in the case where they brought their own children with them, they told us to go and play outside so that mommies and daddies could have a nice talk. But when Uncle Owen came, he insisted on my parents allowing me to stay and listen to whatever they were talking about. And he loved to spend time with just me, you know, playing toys or making a snowman outside. He always said that I was innocent, and for him, this was a way for him to become at least a little bit more innocent himself. I remember once he and my dad went on a winter fishing trip, and Uncle Owen insisted on me coming with them, while Dad was not really up to it. It was really fun, but pretty chilly outside, and I spent almost all of my time in the car and eventually caught a cold. It got worse once we got back home and I was lying in my bed with a fever. Uncle Owen spent the whole night next to my bed giving me hot tea and reading books to me. I guess I was 7 or 8 back then. Now you can see that even though it was a pretty bad illness of mine, I still had warm memories about it thanks to him. But one year changed everything. I was 12. And after another phone call, my dad announced that this time Uncle Owen was going to visit us and bring someone special with him. It turned out that he had met a woman and married her after only a month of being together. And only now did he decide to have her meet us. Huh. As soon as I heard that, I strangely felt I already didn't like her. And when they actually came and I saw her, I was sure that I'd never be able to like her, ever. Susan, that woman, was like 10 years younger than Uncle Owen. She was the kind of a woman who would dress defiantly and totally inappropriate for the occasion. Let me explain. When they came over for the first time, it was snowing outside, but she was wearing a pretty short dress under her down jacket. And the other day, I found her dressed in a leotard print blouse and leggings that were pretty tight. Honestly, if I were her, I would hide those curves, at least while I'm a guest in someone else's house. Anyway, she didn't seem to be a bad person. She was just tremendously dumb. She laughed at everything that Uncle Owen said, even if it was not funny at all. And when she tried to talk to me directly, she either used baby talk, like I was 3 years old, or asked extremely stupid questions, which made me embarrassed for her. For example, she asked me whether I already had my first period and immediately got stuck on the memory about her first period and what she felt and stuff. And when Uncle Owen showed up in the kitchen, where we were at that moment, she decided to tell him what we were discussing. And she didn't shy away from critiquing virtually everything we had in our life, starting from the rug at the front door and ending with the color of our plates. But the worst thing about her was her willingness to complain about my Uncle Owen to my mom. A couple of times I went into the kitchen where my mom was cooking dinner and Susan was bothering her with her chatter, and I heard that she was complaining that Owen's salary was not big enough, about their apartment being way too small, and about his obsession with them having kids. Apparently, she didn't want to ruin her looks with pregnancy. I felt pity for my beloved Uncle Owen, but I knew that I couldn't do anything in this situation. And once they had a really big fight. They were screaming and shouting at each other in the guest room, and my mom, who tried to be a nice hostess, decided to take me to go grab some ice cream to let the two of them be alone. I remember it was then that I asked my mom why she thought the two of them were fighting, and she said it was probably because they were way too different from each other. That really made me think, and I decided for myself that when I grew up, I would definitely choose a proper guy to fall in love with. Yep, I was naive, just like any other teenage girl. Whatever happened after this year, Uncle Owen stopped visiting us. He just said that he had a lot of stuff to do at work, but my mom was pretty sure that it was because he felt embarrassed about their last visit with us, while I was assuming that it was Susan who didn't want to come anymore. So my parents continued talking to him on the phone, and I received presents with sweet notes from him every birthday and Christmas. You know what was actually strange? I began finding myself missing him badly. I mean, I definitely missed him before, but I knew that the winter would come and that he'd stop by again. This time, I was actually thinking about him, especially about his big hands that used to hug me, and his eyes that looked really gentle and loving, and his voice that was really calming. And when I turned 15, I guess, and my dad was telling us how Uncle Owen was doing, as he usually did after his phone calls with him, I suddenly realized that I was missing him more than usual. That's when I actually understood that I was deeply in love with my dad's best friend. Of course, I couldn't tell anyone anything, especially my parents. I mean, my mom wouldn't take me seriously anyways, because she'd think that I was too young to feel something serious. And Dad, well, in the best case scenario, he would just mock me for it. And in the worst one, he'd tell Uncle Owen about my feelings and, oh, I don't know how he would react to that. Maybe they'd laugh together and I would be humiliated and totally devastated. So time passed, and I grew up and tried out dating other guys, and we would go to the movies and to school dances, but I never felt anything serious about any of them. I mean, I still felt that Owen was the ideal guy for me, and I kept comparing my peers to him, and they were definitely losing that competition. When I graduated from school and turned 18, my parents told me that they were ready financially to send me to college. It's just, my dad insisted on me picking the school that was situated in the city where Owen lived. He said he'd be more calm knowing that his friend would keep an eye on me. Of course, I didn't mind. So as soon as I arrived there and settled myself in my dorm, Owen suggested taking me out to dinner. While getting ready for that, I had butterflies in my stomach. You see, even though that many years had passed and I was no longer obsessed with him, I still felt that awkward feeling anybody has when seeing a person they really like. Apart from that, I didn't want to see his wife Susan, and I was sort of preparing myself to be nice to her. But imagine my surprise when I got to the place where we were meeting and saw him all alone. After a nice talk about how I've been doing and how I was feeling about my college roommate, well, and after he'd had a couple of drinks, Owen told me that he was really unhappy in his marriage, and that the reason why Susan didn't come with him was that he suspected she was having an affair, while she had told him that she was going to yoga. And then he said that he hated making Susan's life in the marriage miserable, but he wasn't sure whether he could ask her for a divorce, etc. I just saw it in his eyes. That unhappiness and sadness. And those cocktails made him a little more relaxed and chatty, which made me more relaxed, so I just blurted out to Owen that I was in love with him. We laughed at first, but not because it seemed funny for him. It was as if he was flattered and pleased in a way. And then we made eye contact, and I felt something warm and exciting inside me again. And then after dinner, we went for a walk, and he sort of accidentally took my hand, and I felt like I've never been that close to being happy with someone in my whole life. So for now, Owen and I have been dating for 2 months already, and these have been the happiest and the most devastating months of my life. He says that he really loves me, and that I make him feel innocent and young again, just like he was telling me when I was a kid, remember? And when I'm with him, I feel so inspired, like I'm capable of anything in the world. But when he goes home and I have to go back to my dorm, I can't help but think about his wife. I know that there in his apartment they are together and they eat together and sleep in the same bed and visit their friends together and so on. And even though he promises to solve this problem with the divorce and everything, I just can't imagine the two of us going together to see my parents and telling them that we're in love with each other. How on earth would my dad react to this?